Hello and welcome. What if the future of the internet wasn't decided by the people who built it, but by governments and transnational cartels that barely understand it, or worse, contrive to wrest control of every aspect of it? This report investigates the United Nations Global Digital Compact, an initiative pitched as a shared blueprint for the digital age. Government says it's about cooperation. In reality, it's a sneaky attempt to centralize power, rewrite the rules and redraw the map of online freedom. The cost will be our privacy, our speech and the survival of an open web. The UN Global Digital Compact, GDC, faces significant opposition regarding its unavoidable risks and downsides. The initiative, ostensibly designed to establish global cooperation and shared principles for digital governance, aims at centralizing power within the UN, expanding unlimited government control over digital matters, and eradicating the openness and freedom of the global internet. And here's another catch. The GDC shifts gravity towards nation states and intergovernmental decision-making. And that's a seismic departure from the internet's long-standing model. For the messy, resilient system where civil society, engineers, researchers, and the private sector, and yes, governments, negotiate standards together. If you've never heard of ICANN or the IETF or the Internet Governance Forum, well, that's the ecosystem. It's decentralized by design. The GDC will unspool that fabric and replace it with something more centralized and more political. It will facilitate the erosion of the current prevalent multi-taskholder model of the internet governance, where civil society, private sector and tech communities collaborate on an equal footing. The GDC's increasing emphasis on the role of nation states will empower authoritarian regimes such as China, Russia, to impose tyrannical controls, censorship, and relentless surveillance under the guise of international governance. The proposed UN mechanism for international data governance similarly raises alarms about privacy breaches and the potential for increased government surveillance. The initiative will exacerbate digital fragmentation globally, creating a balkanized internet governed by divergent national regulations, posing challenges especially for smaller businesses and innovators. This fragmentation undermines innovation and stifles the free flow of information across borders. Additional concerns include challenges in coordinating diverse stakeholders, bureaucratic inefficiencies, power imbalances favouring dominant tech companies and wealthy nations, and insufficient safeguards against digital rights abuses, censorship and manipulation. The environmental impacts of digital technologies, such as increased e-waste, are also inadequately addressed by the GDC. Overall, while the GDC pretends to foster cooperation and progress on digital development goals, its hidden design and implementation raise serious questions about centralization of power, the obliteration of freedom and privacy, and regulatory fragmentation. The unsolicited UN's GDC menaces all freedoms under its fascistic digital governance framework. The fear isn't abstract. When the centre of gravity moves to nation states, those with authoritarian instincts gain a bigger pen. What follows can look like international consensus that quietly opens the doors to censorship, data, localization and surveillance, all under the false premise of stability and security. The GDC also gestures at international mechanisms for data governance, rules for the flows of personal and industrial data across borders, which is the motherlode for surveillance. Data localization mandates force companies to keep data within borders, an authoritarian's dream. It makes dissent easier to track and punish. Lawful access frameworks can expand into blanket interception, especially where judicial independence is weak. Without hard requirements for transparency, due process, and independent oversight, a global framework becomes a policy laundromat, a way to legitimize domestic dragnets through international agreements. Privacy is the first casualty when a system is built to watch. You've heard of the splinternet, the idea that instead of one global web, we get a patchwork of national internets with incompatible rules. The GDC will accelerate that fragmentation. Divergent content rules. One country demands takedowns, another allows the speech, a third criminalises the same words. Conflicting safety and age verification mandates that require invasive ID checks and facial recognition. Competing security standards and trusted vendor lists that map neatly onto geopolitical alliances. Well, who pays the price? Not big tech. They simply lawyer up. It's the startups, open source developers, small businesses, indie creators. The compliance tax becomes existential. Innovation migrates to a handful of jurisdictions or even disappears. Even if you like the idea of global coordination, the UN is a robotic machine of unelected committees, consultations, and communiques. That creates three risks: bureaucratic drag. Urgent issues get slow-walked or diluted to the lowest common denominator. Power imbalances. Wealthy nations and dominant firms shape the text. Smaller states and civil society struggle to keep pace. Capture. When the process becomes the product, the most organised lobby wins. A compact that doesn't hardwire accountability and transparency invites the very abuses it claims to restrain. Any digital compact worth the name should put human rights first: freedom of expression, privacy, association, due process, non-discrimination. But drafty frameworks and soft language become loopholes. Safety without safeguards becomes censorship. Integrity without independent courts becomes political takedown orders. Security without proportionality becomes perpetual emergency powers. Algorithmic risk management without transparency becomes manipulation at scale. Without binding, enforceable protections, rights degrade into advisory notes. Then there's the material reality of the digital world: energy-hungry data centres, water used for cooling, and mountains of e-waste. The GDC references sustainability, but offers no concrete mechanisms. No life cycle requirements with teeth for devices and batteries. No global standards for repairability, reuse, or modular design. Vague commitments on data center efficiency and renewable power. A compact that governs digital information but ignores the physical world simply shifts the environmental burden onto the planet. To be fair, supporters of the initiative highlight genuine benefits: harmonised rules for cross-border data flows, consistent safeguards for artificial intelligence, a baseline for platform accountability, and efforts to bridge the digital divide: less chaos, more coordination. But coordination only works if it strengthens, not supplants, the multi-stakeholder model. It works if rights are enforceable, not optional, if international doesn't become a synonym for unaccountable, and if the text can't be weaponized by the very regimes human rights law exists to restrain. In other words, the burden of proof is on this compact. Governance architecture: is civil society a co-equal or a courtesy seat? rights backbone are privacy and free expression enforceable with redress. Data safeguards are surveillance powers narrow, audited and appealable. Anti-fragmentation. Do rules reduce conflict or multiply contradictions? Environmental commitments. Are there measurable, binding targets for e-waste and data centre sustainability? If those answers are weak, the GDC becomes a transparent veneer for centralisation and tighter control. It falsely promises cooperation and progress, but a compact that concentrates power, normalises surveillance and fractures the web doesn't secure our future. It silently ushers in a slower, quieter suppression of freedom. The internet was born open because no one owned it. The more we forget that, the easier it is to sign it away. Without consulting the Australian community, its government participated in the seditious development and consultation process of the UN GDC and endorsed its deep state principles, supporting a tyrannical approach to digital governance. The formal adoption of the Compact occurred at the UN Summit of the Future in September 2024, where member states, including Australia, participated in the discussions and implementation planning. While the treasonous Australian government has deceitfully expressed clear public support and is involved in ongoing implementation and consultations, the final GDC is structured as a voluntary, globally endorsed framework rather than a binding treaty. So countries sign up by supporting, endorsing and implementing its objectives. The Australian people did not sign up for this. Our treasonous government did. Plus, we all know what voluntary means in the venomous fork-tongued language of the United Nations. I'm Tony Lambert and this is the Secret Harbour Sessions. If you found today's report useful, please share. It needs to reach the eyes and ears of human rights advocates and freedom supporters everywhere. Thank you for watching.